Hi, everyone. Welcome to the very first Gardening Coast to Coast video podcast. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with Gardening Coast to Coast, Gary from The Rustic Garden and myself started a podcast back in September. He's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. We're sharing tips from our gardening zones and also just bringing gardeners together from all over the world, helping us grow a better garden. And we started the podcast back in September. We have 7 or 8 episodes so far, and by popular demand, a lot of people were requesting that we also upload the recording of our podcast in video form on YouTube. So this is the very first one. This one also happens to have special guest camera guy. So a lot of you already listened to the podcast over at gardeningcoasttocoast.net. We're going to try this a couple of times and see how the response is. Hope you guys enjoy it. You can get all of our podcast information, links to the podcast episodes over at gardeningcoasttocoast.net. While you're there, leave us a question to answer on a future podcast, and we really thank you all for your support. So enjoy the video, guys. We'll see you later. Thanks so much for listening and for watching. Bye-bye.
So today's podcast is answering listeners' questions, really, about anything, all subjects. We do have a question down the line about YouTube, and maybe that gives you a chance to introduce somebody.
Yeah, we are really excited because we have our very first special guest. We've been wanting to do some special guests. Our first one is Jerry, which most of you know as Camera Guy. So come on, Jerry. Thanks
Hey
for being
there.
on the podcast here today.
Hey, Gary.
Welcome,
How are
Jerry.
you? How are
Good
you,
to see you
Gary?
again. Very good. Very good. Thanks.
Good to see you.
Now, for those of you that don't know, Jerry is my husband. We work as a team to produce gardening content for our channel, for Gardening Coast to Coast, for Instagram, Facebook, all kinds of things.
Yep.
So really excited to have you as the first guest today.
Yeah, thanks.
And
It's good to be here. Go ahead, Gary. Sorry.
that's all right. No, I'm always jealous of Jerry and his camera skills.
Well, thanks a lot. It means a lot. Uh, I always had fun when we go out there to film with you because you enjoy it so much having a camera person there. You do all of your own filming and talking, which is incredible. But I always like it because you're like, oh, it's so good to have Jerry here, a camera person. So it's really fun to film you three. I mean,
If you're,
you too.
yeah, if you're never, or if you're not appreciated 100%, you can always fly down to the East Coast for a week.
I appreciate it plenty because when I try and film my own videos, I'm moving that dang camera around and trying to get it in the right position and everything. Filming with Jerry is a lot easier than filming myself.
Well, thanks. We've definitely come a long way. But when the two of you get together, it is just hilarious because you two just go into your own worlds, and I'll lose you sometimes. I'll look around for you, like, where are they? Oh, they're out of the garden, and it's just really fun. It's just when gardeners get together, it's just is good times.
Talking about tomatoes or compost or something like that. I don't know.
Sure. It's a lot of fun.
fun.
Seriously, when I don't have to hold the camera or worry about it, it is like another world because you just walk around and talk and, get filmed and stuff like that. So
You
I
don't have to
know
think about it.
no thoughts whatsoever. Now I know you have a couple questions for your husband.
Yeah. Jerry, why don't you just share how you got started in filming and media, and you really have a passion for it, and it really comes through in what you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, it actually started when I was 10, and I went to Disneyland for the very first time. And I went to Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln as a 10-year-old, and I'm tearing up at the end of this thing, and I'm thinking, why is this so moving to me? And I kind of figured out. I learned early that it's about image, music, and timing, and you put those together, and you can move people, and that's what got me going. And then from there, it started with slides. Some of you may remember slides, or not. But then I started doing slideshows, and then cameras came around, and I started with, the tape cameras. And if you shot 2 hours of tape, you had 2 hours of tape to put into your editing system, and just kind of went from there.
Now that is your passion. Like I can tell just listening to you and watching you. And that's, I think, one of the keys, especially for YouTube or anything you do, is that if you don't have a passion for gardening, assuming we're going to be talking about a gardening channel for YouTube, it's really hard to do because it's not hard, but it's not easy. You have to have that energy and passion behind it to keep you going.
Yeah, that's really the magic between Kim and I, because here I was playing around with these cameras, and Kim starts gardening, and then we put the two together. So while she's having fun gardening and teaching others, I'm having fun trying to make it look like a TV show. So it was a good combo.
I don't know if I ever would have started a YouTube channel if it wasn't for Jerry because I love gardening, but you were trying to make like a viral video with your friends and tell us how that whole thing started.
Yeah, our channel really started as a fluke. Me and some of my buddies were talking about YouTube, and did you see the kitten video that got 4 million views? Why is that? So we all just tried to create a video and post it, and we were going to just see whose video would do best. One fellow went down to the beach and he filmed a talking bird that would talk to people. One guy filmed a spider. And saw Kim filming one day or gardening. I go, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Oh, I'm making compost." I go, "Oh, I'm going to film it." And we uploaded it just to see what would
On a
happen.
fluke.
And that's how it started.
People
What
started
year was
asking
that?
for more.
2011.
2011. Okay, good.
Yeah,
I forgot.
2011, and then 2012, I think, when we actually started in and posting.
Because I just checked. I started 2011 too, and so this is really the 10th year. So this is what we were talking about earlier.
Willow.
You hear the dog in the background. That's Willow. She's 6 months now, and she's looking at the lights, crying.
Aww. I saw she just
Come
got
here.
her first haircut there on your Instagram. That was pretty cute. Or on her Instagram, right?
She does. Willow and Tuck. If you want to
Yeah,
follow
Willow
her,
and Tuck. It's very
Oh,
cool.
we're gonna. I'm gonna. We can just pause here.
okay.
Let me clear the dog out, and we'll come right back.
Do you
Okay.
have a piece of tape?
So now that I put Willow away, she's having her bone with peanut butter in it. I was saying that I started in 2011 too. I know as we were talking, you said 2012, but I did my first video in 2011, and it was, I think, kind of terrible. And it was like, I've been away from gardening and now I'm back on vacation. I need to tend the garden. It was just forced. It was silly or whatever. However, by doing that video and sticking with it, and that's what I want to encourage people to do, no matter how much you don't like your first videos, just keep going and going and going, because you kind of find your groove. So we've been doing this for 10 years now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because we look back at our first video and just cringe, just like you were saying, Gary. And Jerry's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe the filming I did back then or the camera I used or whatever."
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Back then, the camera I was shooting with was not an autofocus; it was a manual focus. So I was constantly, moving things around and that type of thing. But yeah, you're right, Gary. You definitely have to keep going and let that first one just be there. It's fine. It's okay. Let it be.
So we will get back to you, Jerry, with all your insight for really doing the camera work. Yeah, you laugh. You're really good at it. So I think people really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Really
Gary.
doing the video work for your YouTube channel. But we have a lot of questions that we want to get through today. And let's just start with some of the questions not related to starting a YouTube channel, but certainly with gardening.
Okay, cool. We actually got a lot of questions on our email, so it's really nice to see people emailing in. Our first one is from Elaine P. And Elaine says, "Is it a good idea to introduce eggshell calcium to my garden boxes, when I put it to sleep for the winter?"
Yeah, I mean, the answer is so eggshells. So everybody loves eggshells, and there's a little bit of a myth, I think, behind eggshells with how quickly they work. So if you take an eggshell and you just throw the shell into a compost pile, that's going to take decades to break down. So if you crush it up or you pulverize it into the dust, it creates more surface area. Just like if you tear up a piece of paper, you get all that edging and it creates more surface area. So you can put eggshells wherever you want, anytime you want, in anything that you want, and they're not going to hurt your soil. They do take a while to break down, so they might not give your containers what you think, but over time, it certainly will give calcium back to your soil.
I think it's kind of cool. What we've been talking about all along is there's so many different ways to garden. So if that's something that you want to do, absolutely go ahead and do that over the winter time. It's not going to hurt. I like to add them to my compost and then, add the compost to the garden beds. And I think one way to get them to break down quicker is just throw them in your coffee grinder. That way it pretty much pulverizes them. But yeah, if you notice in your compost pile, if you put your eggshells in there, they're the last thing to break down. That's why you always see little pieces of eggshells in your compost.
And I
But
used to
definitely
do,
good to do.
yeah, I used to do a little trick with once you pulverize them, if you put in a couple teaspoons of white vinegar, it'll start dissolving them, and that's what frees up the calcium. And that calcium then can be immediately picked up by your plant. So if you're really wanting to rush the process, you could put in a couple tablespoonful full of white vinegar into your eggshells, let it sizzle kind of, it'll make that, fizzing sound. And when that fizzing sound stops, it's perfectly fine to put into your garden.
Great tip. Okay, our next question comes from Ann Lieb, and this one is kind of a multi-part question here. Hello from Silver Springs, Maryland. Is that near you, Gary?
Yep. Silver
Still
Spring. Yep.
cool. I'd like to get a raised bed to start vegetable gardening, but one that is essentially a very large container, waist high, and does not contact the earth. What soil mix do I fill it with? Do I fill it with potting mix, the same I use for houseplants, with granular slow release fertilizer, mix that is specifically formulated for raised beds? So let's go ahead and tackle that one first. You guys might or might not know that I have a raised bed gardening book coming out in the spring, and I actually have several different soil mixes in there. And soil can be so expensive when you're filling a big raised bed. You can spend so much money on soil, and try and keep it as cost friendly as possible. So what I like to do is, if I'm filling a big raised bed, line the bottom with things that you collect around your yard. You can collect leaves, you can collect branches, twigs, those types of things, and kind of line about the bottom third of your raised bed with those type of organic materials. And then there's lots of different ways you can go with soil if you want to really keep it budget friendly. Just grab some of the topsoil that you might have around your yard, if you have any, and fill it, kind of fill in the empty spaces with that. And then you can kind of fill it all the way to the top with like some bagged compost or homemade compost, even like a raised bed bagged mix, or like a garden bed mix that you might buy at the garden center. So there's lots of different ways you can go. So that's one way to keep it really budget friendly.
Yeah, and you may already do this, but I just want to say, just in case, because we are really trying to help out brand new gardeners too, is just make sure you have drainage in there. The worst thing that could
Yes.
happen is water fills up in there and it's going to rot your roots out. But I'm going to assume that you do have drainage. And just like Kim was saying, the bottom third can be just about anything. It's that top 6 inches you want more of the quality stuff. And I understand everybody can't go and make their own. That's usually the cheapest way to do it. But when you go into the big box stores, you're going to see bags of all kinds of stuff. You don't need the expensive stuff with all the fancy labeling, stuff that says, grow 2 times the bounty or more blooms and all that kind of stuff. If you actually look in the bottom left corner of that bag, there's an asterisk and it says, when compared to other unfed plants. So they're bragging about how good their product does, and it's just because it has fertilizer in it, and that's what we all do anyway. So pay as little as you can for these bag products, and they're going to work out really well for you anyway, because they're mostly just peat moss and earth mixed together in some capacity. So more expensive is not better.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've been talking to on past podcasts about throwing in that granular slow release fertilizer. So that's definitely something you want to mix in. You want to have give your plants plenty of nutrition to start off with, so they get off to a good start. And that way you should be good to go. But I think the most important thing is, don't overthink it. Just do whatever, you have room for in your budget, and you should be good to go with that. But also, my book will have 3 or 4 different types of soil mixes that you can put into your raised beds, so you know exactly how to get started with that too.
Can I interject something here?
Sure.
In your last podcast, Gary, you had talked about the bag, what it says on the bag, and how
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of misleading consumers and a lot of beginners. And I think it's great that you point that out, because I think a lot of people just follow whatever that bag says to do, and next thing you know, you're filling that whole thing up with soil when you maybe don't really need to, and you can save money. I think it's just good that you guys talk
It's
about that sort of thing here.
Definitely.
it can cost you so much money to go with the stuff with, let's just say, advertising on it.
Yeah, good.
So
That's right. Just keep it budget friendly. Now, let's see. I think Anlieb does have a little more to the question here. Okay, yeah, this person asks about an insect netting cover. So is that a good thing to use, to not use? Is it going to block out too much sunlight? Should I leave it on, long term, or how's that going to affect the growth of the plant? So I guess it really just depends on what kind of insect issues you have. Like, we don't have tons and tons of terrible insect issues here. So if I put a cover on, I may not leave it on long term. Whereas I know, Gary, you there in Maryland with the high humidity, you really have a lot of insects that you have to deal with,
yeah,
where that might
so
be really beneficial in that area, especially in Maryland there.
yeah, so every garden's going to, be different with the insects. And I don't, when we were down there, I don't think I saw that crazy white butterfly flying around. I don't think you have that butterfly. Anyway,
We have some, but not like tons like you do.
Yeah, so from
Yeah.
April till really now, even though now that it's still warm in October, this, psychotic white butterfly flies around and just lays eggs on every leafy green that you have. So the agricultural fabric or insect mesh or whatever you want to call it, is a great savior of work if you want to use it. And it will not block the sun. It will not harm your plants. It's light enough that the leaves can lift it up. So you can really use it however you want and leave it on as long as you want. Rain will fall through it. I water straight through it for the plants I have covered. So it's a good product to use. Just make sure that if you are going to select one, you want to select something that has the ultraviolet protection, a UV protection, so that the sun doesn't decay it. And after one season, it's just going to shred and fall apart. So you can save yourself some money by spending a little bit more, but getting the insect fabric that's UV protected.
Now, I know, Jerry, when we were out there, we filmed a video, Gary. You had a cool little zip up cover that fit over your garden bed. I don't know if you remember filming that video.
I think so.
But
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
pretty cool because it made
Oh
it
yeah.
super easy. It just zipped right up. But you can also get just the ag fabric like you talked about, or even like a sheer curtain. It might not allow quite as much sunlight to come through, and it probably doesn't have the UV protection. But if you want to really keep it simple and on the budget, budget friendly side, you could definitely do that as well. Stick a few stakes in your garden bed, throw it over there, clip it on, and you're good to go.
And that's one of the things when you're setting up your garden. If it's your first time, you're going to learn what diseases come, what pests come. You're going to hear about putting dust down, sprays down, ag fabric, and I just want to spell it. It's AgFabric. It's ag fabric if people are going to look for it. They all work. You just want to establish a routine for yourself. So, like every 2 weeks, if you're doing sprays or you're doing dust, just stick with that routine. It's going to make a difference. If you're going to use the insect barrier, the ag fabric, that's going to work too. Um, One's not better than the other. It just is really based on what you feel like works best for you.
That's right. It's always good to try different things and then make adjustments the next time that you garden.
So going back to YouTube, Mark B asked me a question, and I get this a lot. They ask me, what kind of camera do I use? And if you watch my videos, you know that I do sort of point of view. So I'm behind the camera and walking around, and I can make people seasick. So I guess if I had one big tip, it's to move your camera very slowly. And even in saying that, sometimes I move it too quickly. But that's the number one tip, that if you don't slow your camera down, people aren't going to watch your video because you're just going to get them seasick. But I use a little Power Shot. It's made by Canon. I've been using that camera for 10 years. Every couple of years, I get the next upgrade in camera. And I really like it because it just stays focused no matter what you're doing. And that's one of the biggest things that I found I had trouble with when I went to I don't know, is it the digital cameras or whatever, sometimes the focus comes in and out. And I think you can talk to that, Jerry.
Sure.
But I liked the Canon PowerShot because it was just simple for me to do. I can put it on, a tripod, shoot my video, and be done with it.
Regarding cameras, I think you're onto something, and that is just shoot with whatever you have at the time. Uh, don't let not having the right camera stop you from starting a channel and filming your garden. If that's what you want to do, just use whatever you have. A couple of tips I would suggest is, if you can, film in the early morning or later in the afternoon, because the sun is softer and it's just not as harsh on your face, and shadows on the plants and on your eyes and that type of thing. There's all kinds of, going back to cameras again here for a minute. Um, I think the more complicated of a camera that you think you need to get is also going to introduce more complicated problems.
Right.
Like Gary, you were just talking about the focusing and that type of thing. So you may want to get a camera that's just purely automatic, and it doesn't have any type of feature where it allows you to set your apertures and things like that. It's just going to stay automatic and stay that the whole screen will remain in focus the whole time. The neat thing about us is that was my hobby. I enjoyed something a little bit more complicated. I shoot with a Sony camera. This will probably run you maybe around 2,000 for the body,
Wow.
and then a couple thousand for the lens. However, though, and Kim will speak to this, I have been known to miss some shots because I didn't have the camera in focus.
Yeah, those miss shots are always a lot of fun because we go in, we get to our computer where Jerry downloads the footage, and I'm like, oh, I thought that was in focus, but it's not. We have to go back out and reshoot it. So that's always kind of a bummer.
Yes. So again, I just follow with you, Gary. You may want to keep it simple and do something that's an automatic. For another example, a little bit lower on the cost scale, this is the GoPro 10. It is actually a very good camera, video wise. Also, just for photos, it has a lot better of a microphone on it now, and it's nice and small. And I think this ran around 400. And I use this for some of our in the barrel shots and the water hitting the lens, just because I think it adds a little bit of what Kim and I call production value,
Hmm.
to the shot. But again, so this is called the GoPro 10, and it's automatic and it will just run itself. You just point and shoot and film.
It's kind of fun
That's
because
good.
it doesn't matter if it gets wet or dirty. So
Yes.
still goes with it.
And the Power Shot, just going along with that, is actually, and I am not affiliated with them, and we're not affiliated with any of the products.
No.
But if you'd like to advertise on Gardening Coast to Coast, you can send us an email at gardeningcoasttocoast.net or at gmail.com. But the Power Shot's only $279, so
Wow.
Oh, cool.
it does a little bit of everything, and it makes it a little more budget friendly.
And everyone's got a phone now. Most everyone has a phone with a camera on it. Those work fine as well. Just move the camera slow, like Gary was talking about, so we all don't get seasick. And I think you'd be good.
Yeah, on that note, because I know almost nothing about the fancy cameras, I actually shoot a lot of my midweek videos when Jerry's at work, either with my iPhone or with my iPad. So I want something very basic, very simple, auto everything that all I have to do is push a button, put it on a tripod. So just encourage people, you don't got to have that fancy camera if you have a phone and a tripod, or even just hold it. You're good to go.
It works. And I would, as you know, Kim and I encourage you to get started with gardening. Same thing with the YouTube channel. Don't worry about the people that comment negatively or anything like that. Just kind of get started. When we started, there were already maybe 1 million videos on growing a tomato plant.
I
You
think
can
so.
still find your groove if you just kind of stick with it. Now we have a question from Jim W. He says, and this is about closing out your garden in the winter. He has 3,000 acres of trees or a forest behind him, so he has plenty of leaves.
Wow.
And his question is, I was planning on putting a layer of wood ash down, then a layer of alfalfa. He said seeds, but I think he means pellets, and then crushing leaves up, covering everything in my beds. And then should I put a tarp on top of it with a few holes in there? And what's the best way to do it? So again, we talked about this a little bit in the previous podcast, but there are 1 million ways to put a bed to rest. So potash, which is wood ash. If you burn your wood, you can take that, sprinkle it down. That's great. You could put down the leaves like he's talking about, the alfalfa pellets. If you want to cover it, I would only cover it if wind is an issue that it's going to blow everything away. That's just an extra step you don't have to do. But if you do cover it, it's going to keep it moist, keep it dark. All that stuff is going to break down. And that's one of the beauties of putting your beds to rest in the winter, at least here on the East Coast. I know you continue to garden, on the West Coast, is that we get 4 or 5 months of just letting the worms and microbes do their thing. And then come spring, we can turn that under and we have great stuff for our garden. So to answer your question, Jim, you could do it exactly as you said. Or I would omit the cover if you don't need it and just let the rain and moisture and stuff take care of it, and your bed will be good to go.
Or even if you're like here on the West Coast, we can grow year round. But sometimes people don't want to put their whole garden beds or plant their whole garden beds out during the winter time. So I think leaves are a fantastic resource. Great way to save money. And like you said, Gary, they bring in the worms like crazy. And what I usually do is just throw the leaves on the top of the bed and even put in like some red mustard green seeds are in there just kind of as a cover crop. And it brings the worms in, and then you can chop and drop in the spring and just add all that good organic matter to the soil. And your soil and your plants will be a lot healthier because of it. So it's a great practice to get into, is just save all those leaves.
So the second question is he's going to fill a couple 55-gallon drums with leaves, and he's wondering, should he cover them or not? So I did this experiment. If you have leaves, now is the time to fill up trash cans, 55-gallon drums, whatever you want. They will break down. I have a couple videos on it, and the leaf mulch that I have as of October, last week actually, is beautiful. So I put leaves in a trash can last October. 12 months later, it's amazing stuff. So it's definitely worth it. I would just say to Jim is make sure there's drainage holes. You don't want water to fill up in there. And I found leaving the cover off and letting the rain really soak in there really sped up the process. I had one container that I had covered with holes in it, and that broke down much more slowly. So I say leave it uncovered, let it soak, and it will break down. Put the holes on the bottom of your container too, so worms can climb up into there and other stuff can get into that.
See, it's kind of funny, Gary. There's so many different ways to garden. I put mine in a big compost sack, which is like 100 gallon, like fabric container type of thing, a soft sided container. And I tend to like shred them up really well. And then I take them off if it's going to rain, which we seldom get rain. But then
Hmm.
I cover the top just so it heats it up a little bit more. And it breaks down too. So there's just so many different ways to garden. It's really fun just to hear different tips from all over the place and just get out there and do it.
Let's take one more question, and we'll go back to YouTube.
So our next question comes from Tammy B from Florida. And Tammy B is asking a question about beneficial nematodes. Can you talk about the use of beneficial nematodes for soil health and pests? I grow in fabric containers and had grub worms which ate the roots in 2 tomato plants this year. I want to have healthy soil in my garden pots and not I want to have healthy soil in my garden pots and not have to get rid of my soil. Thanks so much. I enjoy this collaboration. Thank you for all that you do. Well, I've actually
So
never
I can
used
talk.
beneficial nematodes, um, but I know that there are small little microscopic organisms that you can add to your soil that really eat the soil-borne pests or the pests that actually live in the soil. So it's actually a pretty cool way to do organic gardening is with beneficial nematodes. That would actually be a really cool experiment to try.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I can talk about them, but I'm just going to be making it up because
Yeah.
I've not used them before. But what you described is accurate. And you can go online because I actually have some in my refrigerator. I just never got
Oh,
to
wow.
use them. But you can
Cool.
order the beneficial nematodes, you mix it into water, and you just pour it into the soil, and it will kind of destroy the stuff that's bad. Now, I don't know if they work on grubs. I know that they will kill off bad nematodes with the good nematodes. But you might want to do a little bit more research on that, to answer your question.
Now, I know that there are specific nematodes that will kill off specific pests. So there's different ones that you can look up. Like if you're having a grub issue, just do your research, see which ones actually will kill the grubs, see if they actually will kill the grubs, and then go from there. But definitely, Tammy, if you give that a try, let us know because we would really like to learn from that too.
The point that you made about identifying the grub or what's going on is really, really important. One of the things that happens as a new gardener in the first couple years, gardener, is you get a problem and then you go online and say, "Hey, I have this," and you get 30 different explanations on
That's
what
so
to do.
true.
And then before you know it, you're spraying, you're dusting, you're putting in a companion plant, you're doing all this kind of stuff. And a lot of times it's not good advice. It's not like they're trying to mess you up. It's just you don't have enough information. So you do want to keep a journal, as I always say. I know Kim says, as Gary says, keep a journal. But it really matters to try and identify the pest when the pest shows up, or the leaf pattern if it's a fungal disease when it shows up, and then research over the winter or during that year trying to figure out how to address it. Because I bet you will figure out what that grub was and you can figure out how to kind of manage it. But it's really important not to throw the kitchen sink and everything else at your plants when you're trying to save them.
I think it's kind of good maybe to try one approach at a time, see if it works. And then if not, move on to another one because that way you know actually what does work and what doesn't. And by all means, just don't get so overwhelmed because there is just so much information out there. I tend to look for like three different sources when I'm doing research and then just kind of leave it at there because you could really go on forever on that one. So, yeah, but definitely let us know how it goes.
The other question I have about YouTube is from Sarah, two Sarahs. And it's a really good question. It's long. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to summarize it. She wanted to know how to do an introduction. And she said that my videos are kind of to the point and just give, real bare bones instructions on what's going on. And then other people talk for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes. How do you figure out what to do? So, and Kim, you could probably address this too. I think what you want to do, in my opinion, in the first 20 seconds, you want to let the viewer know what they're going to learn from this video. And you want to throw in your introduction. I know some people do longer beginnings, some people do short beginnings. I just kind of go right into the video. That's up to you. But you really want to make that first 20 seconds everything you want to put out there. Then the viewer knows they're going to learn about staking tomato plants. And then how long you go on is really up to you. I don't want to discourage you from finding your style, but I find people kind of want it to move along pretty quickly. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and it really does depend on your individual style. And Jerry, you can jump in here too, because Jerry is really good at the production value of the videos. So I may have one idea, and he may say, "I think this would be a better way to say it that people would understand and listen to it more." And Gary, you probably saw this when we were at your house filming. Jerry,
I
Jerry,
did.
Jerry has some really good suggestions on how to present the information. Did you want to
Yeah.
jump in here,
Yeah,
Jerry?
well, sometimes Jerry thinks he's making a TV show, so he could probably dial it back a little bit. But
It's okay.
yeah, I to go back to the question, I think the old adage of tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And I do think that in my own opinion, that the desired video length is getting shorter, and people don't really care for a lot of backstory. I know that if I'm watching a tutorial and they're taking a long time and they're telling me about their whole life, if I don't hear that within 1 minute, I will go to another video. So I think keep that in mind as well.
Yeah.
And I think it is really good to hit them strong right out of the gate. Hey, in today's video, we're going to learn how to do this, that type of thing.
Yeah, I'd say that too. I like to keep my videos sequential, like have things that people can follow and easily accomplish at the end of the video. So they do have a takeaway. But that being said, it's fun to throw in personality, maybe personal stories. But some videos lend themselves more to that, like our garden tours. Or Gary, I know you do the Friday ramblings on your channel, which is
Mhm.
more of a longer form content, like our garden tours or our live streams. So definitely kind of know the purpose of your video and how long that particular video people might watch that particular video.
Yeah, and I think that's what if you're going to set up your channel, you kind of think of what do you want the spirit of your channel to be. And it
Right.
can be, there's nothing wrong with a 45-minute video, but maybe that's going to be your thing. But don't make it 45 minutes on something that can be done in 3 minutes. I guess that's
Right.
kind of what we're all saying in a different way. You just don't need to spend a lot of time if it only takes 5 seconds to put a clove of garlic into the ground. Don't make it a 20-minute process.
That's right.
So Tammy T has a question. Have you ever come across springtails? And this is going to go along with the nematode question. How do you get rid of them in container plants? She has them in coco coir in her indoor plants. I don't know what a springtail is, so I haven't had them. I
It's
don't know if
it's
you've.
a small little it doesn't quite look like a fungus gnat, but it's that type of insect that will kind of buzz around and be really annoying. It really doesn't eat your plants or do anything bad. It eats like decaying roots and like if you had it sometimes it lives in like mulches and things like that if outdoors. But inside it can be really a pain. But usually it's caused by, overwatering if your soil is too moist. And a lot of times, once you dry your soil out or just don't overwater or put a fan, like if you're indoors, put a fan to kind of dry things out, it will go and find another source of moisture. So that's one way that you can get rid of them is by just making sure that you don't overwater. Um, and then just drying things out a little bit. So I think the concern here was, is it going to damage my plants if I let things dry out? And I would say, well, you don't want to let it dry out all the way, but just don't have your soil dripping wet so that they have a moist environment in which they're going to thrive.
Yeah, and plants always dry from the top down. So if you're letting that top, whatever, couple or maybe half inch or inch dry, it's going to be okay. The other thing that I would do, and I do this for fungus gnats if they're similar, is I use play sand in my indoor plants. So I put
Oh,
maybe a
cool.
half an inch or inch of sand on top of the soil, and it does exactly what we're talking about.
Nice.
There's nothing for them to eat. It dries really quickly. The moisture stays in, and the fungus gnats and probably springtails will just die off.
They're actually also attracted to vinegar. So, like to control the fungus gnats, I'll put little bottle caps of apple cider vinegar with a drop or two of dish soap, and then they'll be attracted to that, fall in, and they won't be, flitting around your plants and driving you crazy around your house either. Okay, so I'm going to read this question from Urban Chicken Mama because she's on my live streams almost every single Monday
Oh, good.
and also comments on our YouTube videos quite often. So I really appreciate that. And her name is Stacy, aka Urban Chicken Mama, which I think is a really fun name.
I love it.
Yeah. And she says, hello, I use fish emulsion, granular fertilizer, and locally made compost, my own compost, and sometimes blood and bone meal to amend and fertilize my garden. I also see worms everywhere in my garden, in my yard and garden. Do I still need to use worm castings and tea? Thanks for all both of you do. I watch both your channels and love all the things I've learned. I live in Auburn, Washington. So cool. That's really
Well, I
cool,
want to
Stacy.
say, yeah, I want to say, you probably have a really happy garden with
I
all
think
that stuff you're
so.
putting in there.
Yeah, it looks
So, I
like
mean,
she's doing a great job.
yeah, and I think my first thought is you don't need all of that. So the short answer is you don't need the worm castings or tea. I mean, um, it's beneficial to use it in certain ways in containers, or if you're just maybe putting the plant in for the first time. But you got so much good stuff going on in there that you have your own compost, you have
It's
locally
a
made
lot.
compost. You're good. I almost feel like you could probably get by with just fish emulsion and compost and just keep your beds going. But this again speaks to the thousand ways to do anything. Um, I just feel like you probably have better soil than I do. So
Well, and I was going to
I
say,
think
if your
that's good.
garden is happy with what you're doing, I don't think you need to add anything else. I mean, the worm castings are great for the health of your plants and the beneficial bacteria and everything like that. But if you're getting some good veggies out of those garden beds, and it sounds like I bet you are, I wouldn't change anything. I would just keep on going with exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and so I mean, you could pull out the castings. You could probably even pull out the blood meal and bone meal because you've got that in the fish emulsion, granular fertilizer, and the compost. You got everything you need. Save yourself some money, or use that money to buy something else for the garden, some trellises or something cool.
Or if she's urban chicken mama, I bet she has chickens. So that's
All
a
right.
great thing to add in there too, is that chicken manure, which I bet you already do, Stacy. Well, today's podcast is sponsored by the Rusted Garden Homestead and Calikim Garden and Home, which is our YouTube channels. And we are looking for sponsors to a future episode. So please let us know if you're interested in that. But Gary, you've had your YouTube channel for, I think, 1 year longer than I have, the Rusted Garden Homestead. Is there any particular types of videos that you're focusing on right now? Or you just kind of go out in the garden and whatever you see, you film? How's that working for
S-
you right now?
So I do kind of go out and film what looks good. So if you watch my Friday morning ramblings, I don't clean up the garden. So you see hoses laying around, you see plastic fertilizer bags, or I'm sorry,
What, you
compost
make a
bags.
mess in your garden?
Yeah, they're blowing around and stuff like that. You see the scissors that my wife was yelling me about, like, where are the scissors? And there they are laying in the garden. So, that's more I just go out and talk about gardening because I love doing that. But
I
then I do make more specific videos.
I think that's real, Gary. Though I like
Right.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and people seem to like that because we, all three of us actually want to just stress that there is no perfection in gardening, and it shouldn't look like an HD TV show. Although, okay, so if they want to offer, a TV show, that's great.
Yeah, we don't torn her
But
down.
no, but it's not picture perfect. It never is. I get so burned out in July and August that the weeds take over. So come the cool weather, to answer your question, Jerry, it's cool weather crops. I like going out there now. It's cool, it's breezy, it's windy. The cool weather crops are doing well. I've pushed everything that I don't want to show on camera behind me, and I just show the cool weather crops. So they're doing pretty good.
There you go. Well, that's great. And my channel, Callie Kim Garden and Home. And what I like to do during this time of the year, which is kind of fun because we can grow year round, but a lot of people can't. And so Jerry and I really like to encourage people to stick with us through the winter time because they might be looking outside at a frozen cold garden. And we do like to bring a lot of color into the garden. I like to encourage people to grow indoors. So we have like an indoor gardening series with really simple, vegetables, herbs, and greens you can grow inside. So, you can check out both of our channels, and listening to the podcast is a lot of fun, but you can go over and search our YouTube channels for a video and then get that much deeper into the learning experience.
Well, I think this is a great time for me to say this, and that is I think what you both are doing here on this podcast is really, really neat. Just a quick example is on my way to work. I have about a 40-minute drive in, and I started your podcast, and I ended up listening to the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
Didn't intend on that. I listened to the whole thing because you guys are both just so pleasant to listen to. You had two different ways of doing things from two different sides of the country, and it was just wonderful. So
That's great.
you're
Thank you.
educating, you're fun, you're being very real. So keep this going. This is a great thing, and I really like where it's headed.
That's pretty impressive because you're not a gardener
No,
really, but you were drawn into that. So thanks for
yeah.
mentioning
Well,
that.
I'm gonna let you say the word pass after I ask this question, okay? So as you were listening, who did you feel just had the best voice
Oh,
presence
thanks,
as
Gary.
I can neither confirm nor deny
Okay.
this without proper authority from my supervisor.
Oh boy.
All right, we'll
Good
give you a
answer,
pass.
Jerry. Good
That's good.
answer.
So let's finish up. We have 4 or 5 more questions, but YouTube. Actually, it's 2 questions. The first one I'll answer real quick. People wanted to know how long did it take for you to get to 1,000 subscribers? How long did it take for you to have videos that were viewed regularly? And it took years. I started 2011. Remember I'm making the first couple lame videos and saying, you know what? I made 3 cents this month. If I can double that next month and make 6 cents and then keep doing this and I can make $50 or $60 a month, I could buy stuff for the garden. And that's kind of how I got started with, all right, let me try with the YouTube. But then I fell in love with gardening as I've always been and just, love making the videos. So it can take you a couple of years, 2 or 3 years to really get the subscriber numbers up, get views going. But it's all going to really come down to your passion and how often you're making content and putting it out there. The other question we have is about video editors. So I use, and again, this is not a plug for them, but I use Power Director, I believe it's called. I found that maybe 10 years ago. I just stuck with it. So my recommendation, it's not so much the um, editing software, it's just picking one, going through that intense learning curve, learn how to do it, and then, stick with it.
Yeah, Gary, I want to go back to your first response about just being consistent in uploading content, and there is no magical formula. There isn't one.
We've tried to find it.
You just got to be consistent and know what it is that you're going to say, and
Yes.
you just let it go, let it happen, that type of thing. So going back now to the video editor, if you're on an iPhone and you want something fairly simple, iMovie comes on your iPhone, so that's going to be at no cost to you. And Kim, you use a really good software too.
Yeah, actually, I couldn't figure out iMovie, so I opted out of that.
Yeah.
And I got a really super easy editing software called Splice, and it is a paid app, but it's super, super easy. If you've never edited in your life before, which I haven't, it's very intuitive and very, very easy to learn. I edit on my phone or my iPad, so you don't have to have anything extra if you don't have a computer or anything like that. It works just fine.
So I would
Beautiful.
suggest either of the two. If you're somebody who wants something really simple, you're not savvy, you just want to get it up there and make a movie out of it. I use what's called DaVinci Resolve, and it's actually a free download. They also have a professional version. I cannot believe this product is free, and I've been using it for 3 years now. It's called DaVinci Resolve, and you'll see where the free download button is. They send out updates, etc. And if you kind of are tech savvy and you kind of want to have a little more control over when the title comes up and how it fades out and that type of thing, then you may want to give DaVinci Resolve a look.
The one thing too I want to add, and then Kim, I think you have 3 or 4 more questions for us. Is our style. So if you go to the Rusted Garden Homestead or Callie Kim, you're going to see the magic you do, Jerry, with the camera. And Kim, you do a great job too. But you're going to
Thanks.
see how he cuts it and all the different stuff. They do voiceovers, all kinds of things. Mine is just kind of point of view, or it's just me. So I'm more just splicing or removing things. But you guys shoot your videos in different parts and then you blend them together, and it's a different look. But that's also kind of up to you. Is like, how do you want to present your channel or your videos? And you can kind of think about it. But point of view is the easiest. Just splicing and fading across is a good way to start. And then as you learn your software more, you can start doing more of the fancy things that Jerry does.
I think the important thing is, like we've been talking with gardening, is just get started. Get out there, grab your phone, get out there, make a video, and then just kind of go with it. And it's usually tends to be like an evolving process. So it's kind of fun to see what happens. You never know. Okay, so jumping back into the garden questions, we got a few more here. Let's see. We got a question from Connie. Why can't I grow beets or radishes? They never form big enough to harvest. My zone is 5B6A, and I love this. She signed it Beetless in Michigan.
So beets do like more phosphorus. Most of your root crops like more phosphorus. That's like bone meal. You have your N, your P, which is the phosphorus, and the K. They don't necessarily like a lot of nitrogen. That being said, the question I get next is, well, how much nitrogen and how much phosphorus? And I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that beets and radishes seem to do fine towards the end of the season, after your plants have kind of used up the nitrogen and stuff. So I don't give them more nitrogen. I might throw in a handful of bone meal, just a dusting or something like that. But sometimes it's a matter of figuring out when you're growing them. If it's too warm, radishes aren't going to form. So you really want to be going from late summer into the fall right now in Michigan, or you want to be coming out of the cold, going into the spring. That seems to help radishes. And beets, I'm not sure. My guess might be, maybe if the beets aren't forming, is maybe to pick up some bone meal and just fix that planting area up with a little bit more phosphorus.
Well, I know beets, definitely do like the cooler weather, but even in the wintertime in California, my beets don't always grow really well because I don't have a lot of sun. So that could be the issue too, is either it's too hot or maybe you're planting them in an area where it might be cool enough, but you're just not getting enough sun. So, maybe you can adjust those few things. Hopefully, you'll be writing us back and you'll have lots of beets so you don't have to sign your question beatless in Michigan.
Somewhat beets would be good.
That's right. Okay, next question is from Angie. Angie has her own worm bin. How long will the castings effectiveness last? Can I store the castings indefinitely? And just so
Forever.
people don't know, castings are actually worm poop. So when you have a worm bin, you're putting in all kinds of organic material, food scraps, kitchen, scraps from the garden, whatever, for the worms to eat. As they digest it, they poop it out, and those are the worm castings, which you can then harvest and use on your garden. So Gary, you
I
say
like
forever, right?
forever, and I like to call it the end product of nature.
You don't like to say that
So
word?
no, no,
We say
no,
P
it's all
double
right.
O P around here.
I'm it's like a 12-year-old.
Oh gosh.
So the castings will last forever, and they don't spoil, and you can hold them really indefinitely because they are the end product. They're just the waste, and it's everything broken down. It's broken into the form the plants like. You can't really break it down anything beyond that. So you can dry it, you can store it, you can do whatever you want with it.
All right. Next question is from Michael C. What is the ratio for using the neem oil and other bug management products? Gary, I think I'd call you the neem oil master.
Mhm.
I love neem oil. So I could plug my book at this point, The Modern Homestead Garden, because that recipe is in there. I have a couple recipes that I use regularly. One of them's peppermint oil, baking soda spray. But the neem oil, number one, is you want to make sure you get 100% cold pressed neem oil. Because if you go to the stores, look into the bottom left corner, if it says hydrophobic extract of neem, they've pulled out all the compounds that really work on killing off those chewing insects, and they just leave you neem oil with nothing good in there, and you might as well be using peanut oil. So first thing is you want 100% cold press neem oil. In that is azadirachtin, and that's the compound that when the insects eat it, it kills them off in a couple of days. So it's really just 1 tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of neem oil in a gallon of water, and I use a tablespoon or two of the Castile type soaps, which are pure and clean and simple. So you can use 1 or 2 tablespoons. You use the soap to really break that, help that oil disperse through the water. So when you're spraying it, you're putting a nice coat of neem down. If you're going to use more detergents like Dawn or whatever, start with a teaspoon and slowly add more in there. You don't want to overdo it with the detergent type soaps. And always, and Kim, you would agree with this,
Definitely.
always test spray. Even if you see Kim and I doing this all the time and you've not used it in your garden before, test spray some of the leaves of each different plant you're going to use it on. Wait 24, 48 hours, look for damage.
And then make sure that you spray, not in the bright sunlight, not like at high noon when it's 95 degrees out. Do it in the morning when it's kind of cloudy or in the evening so that your plants aren't burned. But I think the test spray is definitely the most important thing. I've not test sprayed before and lost plants, even though I've used neem oil a million times, but it's a brand new plant I've never used it on before. So, yeah, definitely always well worth it to avoid that disappointment.
Yeah, before the next question, like, you know that I use hydrogen peroxide in my garden. And that's kind of changed the way I can garden. I spray that in a diluted ratio. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I think it's 6 parts water to 1 part hydrogen peroxide. But please check out the YouTube channel for that. I learned that 3% hydrogen peroxide, which you get at the grocery store and the pharmacy, will damage your plants. And that's because about 7 years ago, I sprayed it directly as a 3% solution onto my pepper plants, defoliated them all. So if you
No.
want a defoliating agent, 3% hydrogen peroxide works well. But that's just the example. You know, I saw the stuff about hydrogen peroxide. Somebody said you could use it straight. I used it straight. It killed off, or it killed the leaves off. The plants came back, but definitely test spray.
Yeah, really important. Okay, I think we've got one more question, and this is actually kind of a loaded question here from Judy A, or it's just a wide range question you could answer in a lot of different ways. I hope you will address perennials, how to grow them, diseases, pests, benefits. I wish I'd planted my fruit trees, asparagus, and berry plants the day we moved in. After all, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, LOL. That is so true.
Well, I think Judy just gave us the theme of our next podcast.
That's
We
right.
could do one. We could do one on perennial gardening, actually.
That could be a whole, entire podcast on itself.
So I don't know. Kim, I'll let you take this. See if
Well,
you can answer it. 10
I
seconds.
10-second answer.
Go.
I think
Yeah.
with perennials, I love growing them because you get the biggest bang for your buck. You can plant that, they cost a little bit more to purchase up front if you're purchasing them, at the garden center, but they're going to come back year after year. And that's basically what a perennial is. They'll die back at some point, or you want to prune it back at some point once it goes dormant, and then it'll come back the next year. So that is one of the huge, amazing benefits that I love about perennials. I love planting a whole area and then not having to do a single thing with it the following year. It just makes my job that much easier. So that's definitely one of the biggest benefits. Typically, they're pretty low maintenance. I know one of my favorites is my blackberries are one of my favorite perennials to grow. And I don't really have to do anything with them. I barely even fertilize them. They get watered. That's about it. Once they go dormant, we cut them back and then they come back the next year with very little effort.
I think we will for Judy to we'll talk about perennial herbs, thyme, chives, oregano, perennial flowers that attract pollinators, perennial vegetables like asparagus, maybe rhubarb, but we'll roll that into a podcast
I
so we
think
can
that would
answer
be
it better.
great. There's so many different ways you could go with that. So thanks for your question, Judy, and stay tuned to a future podcast.
I think let's recap. What is the main point that we would give somebody wanting to start a YouTube channel? What's the one thing you would say is most important? We can start with Jerry.
Keep it simple. Know what you're going to say before you say it.
All right.
And I have to say, he tells me almost every time I film, know what you're going to say before you say it. And of course, I don't usually. So, but anyway, I would definitely say keep it simple. Take an idea and then just break it down even simpler than you think. I like to have 3 main points to my videos, but definitely just keep it very, very simple.
And I think I would go with sum up what you're going to do in the first 20 seconds and then move that camera really slowly, almost at a snail's pace, because I start moving it with how I move my head. It does make people seasick, even though I'm aware of it and been doing this for 10 years. So move the camera much more slowly than you think. If you have future questions for us, please go to Gardening Coast to Coast. It's coast, number 2 coast, gardeningcoasttocoast.net. You can see all our podcasts there. You can leave us questions for next month's Q&A.
And yeah, I just want to say, keep those questions coming. There are no dumb questions in gardening. And the only dumb question is the one that you don't ask. So always feel free to ask, and ask other gardeners in your area too, and jump onto the Gardening Coast to Coast Facebook group, because that is a great group of gardeners from all over the world. People are so nice in there, and they're always willing to help out. You can post pictures and ask just about any question you want, and people will jump in and help you out. So it's really cool to see that.
Thanks for listening, and we will talk with you 2 weeks from now.
All right. Talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Do you hear the dog?
Yes, we can hear the dog.
Nope. Hold on.
Yeah, that way you can stick around for the whole thing.
Come on. Come down here.
Question like how do you start a YouTube channel and stuff like that. That's why he's.
So here's Willow.
Aw.
Hey, Willow.
You need
Bye.
to lay down. Okay.
Okay, let's see if I can talk. Hello. Okay.
Oh no.
Go ahead, Jerry. I think I'm good.
Welcome to Gardening Coast to Coast. Kim got the laughs.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Now I'm going to start laughing.